Yeah, so I think probably now would be a good time to get into talking about the episodes and Echoes Beyond the Veil. What is it? How do we describe it? I think from the conversation we've just had, some key running themes. It's largely to do with telling the stories, historical and also fictional, but really captivating, nuanced stories that show the three-dimensional depth of characters from an African and diasporan origin. And so that's what we're trying to capture, these untold stories that show adventure, nuance. And so let's go through some of the episodes, man. Talk me through this first one that we're looking at called Agwelewe.
Yeah.
What is this?
Agwelewe, not to be confused with Agwelewe or any other name. Agwelewe stems from the Creole word of Guinea-Bissau, water and life. It starts off with a group of slaves, defiant slaves now, who are being thrown overboard a slave ship, and they drift off to an uninhabited island. And upon drifting to this uninhabited island, they encounter this fruit, what we like to call the agwaberry. The agwaberry is, when ingested, creates intense heat in your body, like a very high fever, and basically just intense heat that a normal person wouldn't be able to handle it. A normal person would die from this, from ingesting this. And some people actually do. Some of the slaves actually die from it. But other slaves, in the bid to cool down, they run into the water. And upon running into the water, they find out that steam and bubbles start emanating from their skin, creating this vacuum for them to breathe underwater. That's how the story unfolds. They're able to breathe underwater, and then we start exploring the conflicts about the people who can actually survive underwater and some of the people who can't survive on land, who survive on land. There's a conflict where found the sustenance from the land tribe, and the land tribe rely sustenance from the water tribe.
Gotcha.
The water tribe depend on the land tribe for like the agwaberry. There's this conflict between them, as in when they start denying each other sustenance. And yeah, we'll explore all of that. Maybe there's an underwater city, you never know. I just threw that in there just for a curveball, you never know. So that's how the story unfolds, and that's how we try to tell the story. And what's your take on it?
Interesting. I really like this particular story. It's one of the first ones that we actually came up with because slavery, or the Atlantic slave trade, was a big part of African history, West African history. Yeah. So this is an interesting take on it. It's an interesting spin. What if? It's obviously a fictional story, but
it's a good one.
It's showing. It's speculative, isn't it? I really like this one.
I'm gonna show you the next poster concept that we have, and then I'll let you explain what it is. So,
Sounds good. Just for the people watching, like the posters that we're showing, we made. All right, we generated, we made them with prompting from Midjourney, and then we took them into Photoshop because these are the best. These are literally, I was saying yesterday, these are the best posters I've seen ever. But also because, you know, it's something that came out of our minds, and now it's like staring us in the face. Ironically, it's a face looking at us.
Just add to what you said about like the generation of these images. We didn't just use, it wasn't a one-stop shop to like Midjourney or use a model that was Real Diffusion that was like quite realistic, make it look as realistic as possible, because what we're trying to show is characters in a realistic form, so that when people look at these stories, they can say, oh, this could be me in this story. So
that's a
you want
great
to
point.
what this is about?
Definitely. So Stellar Kin, not to be confused with Interstellar. Stellar Kin is a very interesting story that goes back to one of the very original first tribes here in Africa called the Dogon tribe. And these guys are known for their astronomical beliefs, and those are tied into their cultural practices. But one of the very interesting things about them was that they had knowledge about a star called Sirius A that we can't see with the naked eye. It's impossible. But they were able to see it in the constellation in the stars. Somehow, in some way, and they were able to document this through their cultural practices and their history. There's a lot of folklore behind them. People say it's aliens. People say that you had access to some information, whatever. But the story that we're trying to tell is a fictional but very intriguing story that starts off during the colonial period, where there's a scramble for land here in Africa. And they decide that they cannot bear to see their people be enslaved. And so they decide to leave Earth. They had the technology, so they decide to leave Earth on their spaceship to save their people and take them to the promised land, or to their new home.
The promised land.
And so this whole journey ensues of them later on, 100 years later. That's where the story kind of picks off in a contemporary setting, where people start to get missing. They start to get abducted, right? And then the story takes off from there. There's some plot twists and turns, and it's related to some of the other stories that we're building. But this is probably, from all of the stories that we've made, one of my favorite, definitely. Because it's historically rooted. It's rooted in a historical setting, but it's also fictional and sci-fi and just crazy.
I've got a question for you.
That's it. Go for it.
If they were so advanced,
that's a good question. The thing is, like, they had this. I'm making this up on the spot here,
bro.
But
that's what
they had this.
Literally.
But we're improvising. They had this innate belief that every animal has a right to this earth, and they were pacifists, so much so to the point that they didn't believe in harming their fellow man. And they saw these colonizers as their they saw them as their fellow people, and so they didn't want to harm them. They had the technology. They could have very easily destroyed them, but they chose not to. They chose to leave the peaceful way, and now they're coming back for their people, for their kin. Right,
bro. That's a very good way to put it. And I'm even thinking of another story, and along the lines of a rogue Dogon. One of the Dogons.
Let's not reveal all of our story.
But it would all unravel. But this is the kind of thought process we have when it comes to generating the stories. It's like history, creativity, science fiction, bring everything together in such a way that's going to be very interesting and very rewarding for the viewer. And for us as well, because we're just like everyone, but like we're trying to use our creative mindsets and bring something amazing together. And hopefully everyone will enjoy it.
100%.